It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Not going to bury the lead. Not going to let Joe Manchin bury the lead today. Not going to let it happen. No. And I'm so tired of Joe Manchin right now. But hey, my congressman, Scott Perry, congressman from the 10th Congressional District in Pennsylvania, he going to be the very first sitting congressman that the select committee on the January 6th little shindig that they're looking into. Going to be the first person that they've requested an interview with. I got to imagine a request would come with something else if he denies it. But they're saying, hey, we'd like to know what communications you had with the White House and with the chief of staff and all of that through your Signal app. You know, that app that, keeps everything, encrypted that nobody can get a hold of, because you might not want people to see your treason. Now, again, I'm not saying he committed any crimes just yet, but I do believe, as a sitting congressman, we should know what he was doing on that day. And he should be forced to turn over those communications, especially considering the day that it was. So that an important story. Didn't want that to get buried in all of the Joe Manchin stuff, because this is the real important stuff as well. We got to get to the bottom of it. Also, quote of the day. Sarah Palin, the gift that just keeps on giving, kind of like herpes. She had her comment on Sunday, a big conservative shindig in Arizona. Throngs of cheering folks there when she said, and it's, it'll be over my dead body that I have to get a shot. I mean, let that sink in for a second. They're so dug in on this. We're not getting vaccinated. We're going to literally go to the grave with it, and proud of it. I mean, that's the part that I find really kind of interesting, that we're stupid, we know it, and we're willing to die for our stupidity. And look, we're going to see another wave, a big wave, very predicted, because of, these folks. Because again, you look at any hospital across this country that's filling up with folk, it's the unvaccinated more than anything. Now, what we found out today, because of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they have pointed out that Omicron, now the dominant variant, that was quick. Wasn't it just a couple of weeks ago that we got the very first case? Just a week ago, it was like 12%. Now up to over 73% of the new cases are the Omicron variant. They say highly transmissible. And they're bracing for a large wave, a giant surge, or as the one guy said, a viral blizzard. That is coming. And look, the administration's doing what they're trying to do to get people vaccinated. Saying, hey, the best defense we have really in this moment, get vaccinated, get your boosters, shows the help. Probably going to keep you out of the hospital. May even keep you not dead. Just a thought. This way you won't have to go, over my dead body, I'm going to live. And speaking of Arizona Republican Representative Andy Biggs, he was on Fox News responding to Joe Biden, saying that all Biden really wanted is, to control people. He said, quote, it gets to the notion of what this has been all about, and it's about control. Biden wants control. So his minions like Fauci was on saying, from now on, you're going to have to wear a mask on the airplane forever. He added that this kind of outrageous conduct is a method to try and create an other, to create people to hate, to create people to ostracize, that allows them to claim control. No. We stay away from people who are sick. We isolate those folks who are going to make the rest of us sick. This isn't about control. This is about safety. There's a huge difference. Now, this may be how you would use it, but that's not the reality of what the rest of us are going, hey, there's a proven way to go about helping us stay from having giant, surges and having our hospitals fill up and having, mobile morgues rolling through our streets. And that's getting vaccinated and getting your booster. And I'm generally not someone who jumps on the, hey, we got to get a flu shot or got to get this. I'm generally not. This, according to the experts that I speak to, this makes sense. Now, I'm actually waiting for the day when the Biggses of the world or Sarah Palins and the rest of them start saying that, this was all planned out by the Democrats. They created the division so that people wouldn't get vaccinated. Kind of a, one of those, when your mother told you, you shouldn't do something or you should do something thinking you would do the opposite. This is, I guess, the childish mentality here. Some kind of political ploy by the super masterminds of the Democratic Party to not get Republicans vaccinated so they can die off, like this state senator from Washington State. His name is Doug Erickson. Doug died at 52 years old. Young guy, 52 years old. One of the biggest, most vocal anti-vaxxers out there. Big critic of the vaccine. Dead. And you go, okay. All I can say is, at this point, good luck. I hope your family was insured to help fill the void somehow. Needless, tragic, but I'm through sympathizing. Too far down the road in this. Now, I'm not hoping. I've had people go, I hope they all get sick. I'm not hoping that. I don't want people to suffer. I want people to do the right thing and be smart about it. Also, it's turned out that the story out today that there was someone on Air Force One, a staff member who has tested positive and may have been close to President Biden. I know there are some conservatives out there hoping, I hope he gets it. I don't wish that on anyone. But I don't feel sympathy for those who knowingly choose to not be vaccinated. The Sarah Palins. Over my dead body, I'm going to protect myself. Jeez. Crazy, crazy stuff. Now let's get into the Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin over the weekend thought it was a great idea, going to come out over the weekend and say Build Back Better's dead. He's out. Kind of like one of the sharks. Out. And, immediately you start, what was the reason? You had a whole bunch of, pundits, running back and forth. And look, I said from the beginning, he was never going for this. The reason that the progressives wanted to tie the bipartisan infrastructure piece to the Build Back Better plan was to force the Manchins and the moderates to go, yeah, we're going to do both together. Because without one, you're not getting the other. This is where you go, we knew this. Everyone knew this. You have to trust him. No. Now, Kamala Harris, the vice president, says that it's too big. Build Back Better plan is too big. Stakes are too high. Need to do something about this. Need to push it forward. And look, here's the reality. It's not just Manchin. Manchin's the 50th Democrat. And now there may be a couple others that are a little soft, but probably going to go along with it. Manchin's the one who's been the fly in the ointment all along. And I'm sure there's a reason for that. I'm not quite sure yet. A lot of people say, well, it's the money. A lot of people are saying, it's, he's bought and paid for by the coal interests, the lobbyists, all that. I'm not going to go that far just yet. All I know for sure is every time he says, this is where I am, the goalposts keep moving. And he's gone from, one point to another point there's not been any consistency, which led me very early to say he's never coming around. It's not going to happen. And now the latest excuse, I guess the latest excuse is what's being peddled is that, well, if you give those poor people money, they're just going to waste it. And this is the part that gets me because, we have an entire Republican Party who is also voting against this. Also voting against all of the things that would make working people's lives better. And yet I don't hear anybody really going after the Republicans. Now, look, the Democrats have a problem. They're ripping themselves. This is ripping them apart. The progressive wing's no longer going to trust the moderate wing. This is not a good scenario. But, this is a big but, if they can pull this around in the new year, maybe there's some hope. I'm not sure. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that what Senator Manchin did yesterday represents an egregious breach of trust of the president. And look, this is it is what it is. Representative Jayapal, Manchin has betrayed his commitment not only to the president and the Democrats in Congress, but to the American people. He routinely touts that he is a man of his word, but he can no longer say that. West Virginians and the country see clearly who he is. Now, interestingly enough, the newspaper from his hometown, the Charleston Gazette-Mail, their headline said, "We need this so bad. Build Back Better backers say the bill would protect West Virginia's most vulnerable residents as Manchin resists." Bernie Sanders came out and said, look, if Senator Manchin wants to vote against the Build Back Better Act, he should have the opportunity to do so on the floor. And this is where I agree. There should have been votes on this already. And he, as Bernie says, he should have to explain to the people of West Virginia and the country, why he doesn't have the courage to do this. Now, in a letter to all of the senators, Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, he has vowed to bring up the Build Back Better Act in the new year, and very early in the new year, despite what Manchin's doing. And I think you got to put him on the record. You got to put the heat on him. And there's also part of me that this came out just to ruin Manchin's Christmas, because now all of the heat is going to get turned up even more. He said, look, Schumer said, look, every senator will have the opportunity to have their positions known on the Senate floor, not just on television. And I agree. Now, the interesting response that I saw was from John Yarmuth. He's the chair of the House Budget Committee. He said that Manchin is using discredited Republican talking points to make his case for not supporting the bill. The reason that Manchin has come out and not supporting it is not in favor of the child tax credit. We can have the argument whether it's for everybody. We can make the argument if it should be targeted better. We can make a bunch of arguments. He's really not. He was in favor of most of the things in the Build Back Better plan, but not the $250 per kid, not the money going to families. This is a problem for me because, I see this as another one of those, as Yarmuth says, Republican talking points. If we give those poor people money, they're just going to waste it on drugs and alcohol and lottery tickets, cigarettes. So my executive producer, he tweeted out today, my family got the child tax credit. I didn't buy any drugs with it. And you go, yeah, I got the child tax credit too. I didn't buy any drugs with it. I don't smoke. I didn't buy any of that. And then in came the responses. Tons of them. One person said, I splurged on drugs this month. Bought insulin for my 2 kids with type 1 diabetes, paid $450 out of pocket with insurance. You know what the Build Back Better bill would have done? That would have been $35 each kid. Not $450 had we passed that. Another person said, I squandered all of my tax credit money on groceries. Somebody else said, my newly divorced neighbor bought food and school supplies for her 3 kids. She didn't buy any drugs either. Another person said, I got the child tax credit. I didn't buy any drugs either. I bought groceries with it. Another person said, we bought a home. Another person said, my family received the child tax credit and we applied it to the cost of daycare, $1,200 a month. Another person said, my sister used it towards my niece's daycare. Child care is outrageously expensive. Another person said, my son and his wife used it for preschool so they didn't have to take out a loan. Joe Manchin has no clue, they write. Another person said, I paid the blank out of my electric bill. And I don't know my favorite, my least favorite, most outraged bit of it. This person wrote, my family got the tax credit. I used it for much needed dental work because teeth are luxury bones I can't afford otherwise. And you go, Am I missing something here? And there were, just tons of responses just like that. Because understand, the Build Back Better plan was supposed to address some of these things, to help low-wage working families, to help people, not just low-wage working families, but all families. And as you know, I am not a fan of handout programs. I see any of these type handout programs as simply subsidies for low-wage employers to keep cheating people out of wages. But until we have the ability, a mechanism, I don't know, like a strong labor movement to demand better wages, hours, conditions, to demand better lifestyles for working people, this is the best solution we have for right now. The numbers of kids that have been pulled out of poverty because of this are staggering. And yet you've got the audacity to fall back on failed, idiotic right-wing talking points. They just buy drugs and booze. When we know, study after study has shown, when you give people the kind of resources to be able to care for themselves, you know what they're going to do? Yeah, they're going to take care of themselves. They're going to buy food. They're going to buy clothing. They're going to pay for shelter. They're going to get health care. They're going to do all the things that, you, me, or anybody else would do, or did, because ultimately, most of us got it. Now, you could make the argument that families, making $500,000 a year, or whatever the number was, that maybe we should have, means tested it a little bit better. Maybe my family didn't necessarily need it. Not that I make $1 million. Thank you for that. Maybe we could have had that conversation, but a flat no, we're going to pull this out is just insane. Now, for you people who go, the economy, Rick. Goldman Sachs today. Goldman Sachs. They swiftly moved its economic outlook downward because of the failure to pass the Build Back Better plan. Why? Because it means less people having money in their pockets to be able to afford the things that they need. It means less money going through the economy. It means less economic activity. And, days before Christmas, thank you, Joe Manchin. Insane, crazy stuff. But I'm curious, what'd you do with your child tax credit money if you got any? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Bill Scheer is going to be here to share some thoughts on, what this is about. Maybe if there's a silver lining on the other side. Right back after this. Stick around.
There's a yearning in America, a longing for restoration, an insatiable hunger to rebuild. With nearly 200 million Americans vaccinated and 7 million new jobs created, the message is clear. Americans are ready to work. Donald Trump's catastrophic presidency took its toll, but it did not take us out. With unemployment claims falling as fast as consumer confidence is rising, Americans are buying gifts for loved ones they couldn't even visit just 1 year ago. Today, millions of families are reunited. Yes, there is a yearning in America for our people to grow stronger, to stay healthier, for our nation to regain its prosperity. And though we haven't yet achieved everything we yearn for, it's good to have hope for a change.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Cecil Roberts, president of the United Mine Workers, put out a statement today calling on Joe Manchin to rethink his position on this Build Back Better plan, because ultimately the folks in West Virginia need it. Now, what Cecil had to say, he said for those and other reasons, because understand, in this would have been some help for people with black lung, some tax incentives to bring back some manufacturing, and this would help his members, ex-miners, all of that stuff. So it's good stuff for his members. He said for those reasons and other reasons, we're disappointed that the bill was not passed. and will not pass. We urge Senator Manchin to revisit his opposition to this legislation and to work with colleagues to pass something that will help keep coal miners working and have a meaningful impact on our members, families, and communities. And for the mine workers to come out and say something to Manchin, to me, that's a pretty big deal because they're usually his biggest apologist. So even as tacit as that response is, even as minor as that is, I still see that as something. I'm here to share some thoughts on, where is this dead now? Does it pop up? And why now? I've asked our good friend Bill Scheer to come talk with us. Bill is a contributing editor over at Politico magazine. Bill, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure.
Let's start with the big question, because I'm still trying to figure out why now? Why was this so important right now? That bill wasn't going anywhere before Christmas.
I mean, I can only go on, what's being reported as of late. There were a couple of pieces that got printed, one in Politico, one on the Hill, suggesting that Manchin reacted very poorly to the statement that the White House put out, I believe a week ago, trying to say, hey, this is not going to get done by the end of the year. And they explicitly called out Manchin for the delay in that statement. And the reports are that Manchin had communicated to them, hey, don't name me in this statement, and took umbrage that they didn't listen to him. And so then committed this retribution by dumping all over the bill on Fox News Sunday.
Yeah.
So the question is it really a fundamental substantive disagreement that cannot be resolved, and that's a bit more personal in nature, or is it intertwined with the fact that they do have substantive disagreements and they're not prepared to actually resolve them?
Yeah, the part that I get
quite count out just quite yet.
Yeah, the part that I don't get, and you've been doing this a long time, I don't get why all of this public fighting. Why aren't they locked in a room hammering something out so that you're not seeing this division in public? Because there was just a poll done here that said, what was it, 4 in 10? I guess say Democrats and Biden have done less than was expected, and I think your response to that was, when you want to do the big things, when the bar is so high, I get it, but this isn't. I guess my problem is doing this kind of stuff in public is only making that things aren't getting done image worse. Or am I missing something?
I don't think you're missing anything. And what I don't understand on top of that, I mean, at this stage of the game, Manchin has all the leverage. And that's been pretty clear for weeks now. Progressives try to jam him by holding the infrastructure bill hostage. He didn't blink. Cinema didn't blink. Finally, Pelosi and Biden said to the progressives, look, suck it up, pass the infrastructure bill. Trust me, we'll get to Build Back Better. Very next thing, we'll get the 50. And progressives said, fine. And from that, at that point, it was very clear that progressives were not drawing any red lines as to what was going to be in Build Back Better.
Right.
Already for the past 2 months, while progressives were holding infrastructure bill hostage, Build Back Better was getting cut down. And progressives weren't saying no, they're just saying we're ready to compromise, but let's do them together. Now we're not doing them together. But whatever it is, Manchin, we'll do it. So Manchin doesn't gain leverage with delay. He has all the leverage. All he has to do now is say, look, Joe Biden, this is what I can do, and this is what I can't do, and that's that.
And why can't we have that? Why can't that already be done? That should have been done already, and that should have been moved, a month ago.
Well, from what we just saw today in the Washington Post was Manchin gave Biden a $1.8 trillion offer that had universal pre-K for 10 years. And his whole thing is he doesn't want short time frames. He wants long time frames, so there's no question what cost what. He was going to do a universal pre-K for the whole time. He said he was going to do most of the climate stuff. He was going to maintain, I believe, the enhanced subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, but he did not want to do the elevated enhanced child tax credit, which is a very expensive item over a 10-year period. And from what we can glean, that made the Biden people pause because they didn't want to give up child tax credit so easily, and that seems to be where the impasse is. But that seemed to be an advancement in their understanding of their positions. It didn't deserve a nuclear bomb dropped by Joe Manchin at this point. They just quietly work out these remaining differences.
Right. No, but here's the weird part is, that child tax credit is by far the most popular in it. Even Republicans are going, yeah, that actually did help. I've had some Republican friends go, yeah, that was actually helpful. And the numbers that we see in reducing childhood poverty and doing some of the things that have done to help families. Generally, I am opposed to handout programs on any level. I'm someone who believes that these are generally just subsidies for low-wage employers. But we don't have a mechanism to get people the wages they need to be able to support their families. This seemed like a good short-term fix until we get someplace.
Can you handle a wonky response for me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So here's the tricky thing about child tax credit. It's as it's currently situated, it's very expensive.
Yes.
It's $100 billion a year through 2025. And because Donald Trump elevated the child tax credit in his tax cut bill, but the Donald Trump boost has its own expiration date of 2025. So it was, if I remember correctly, I think it was $1,000 a child before Trump, and it went up to $2,000 with Trump, and with Biden, it's now $3,000 for 6 and up kids and $3,600 for kids below 6. So it goes below 2,000 in 2025. So to maintain the 3,000 to 3,600 in the so-called out years,
right,
it's even more money. It's $200 billion a year. So you start costing it for the 10-year time frame, it gets really, really, really expensive. In fact, CBO had it down to $1.6 trillion on child tax credit alone in the 10-year window. Now, having said all that wonkiness, the part that really helps the poor is what's called refundability. If it's fully refundable, that means if you pay no net federal income tax, you still get the credit. You still get a tax refund from the bill. So that really helps if you're low income or no income. You could not do the elevated amounts. You could go back to the Trump level of $2,000, but keep the refundability for poor Americans. You would still lift 2 million children out of poverty. It would be 4 million out of poverty otherwise, but you'd still be 2 million if you kept refundability, and that only costs $17 billion a year. Much, much cheaper.
Yeah, well, it's cheaper. Yeah, you're right. No, it's cheaper. And screw those other 2 million kids. They can pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
I mean, I don't want to be, that, callous about it. But I mean, we're on the verge of where we're getting nothing, where we're going to lose all 4 million kids. This gets cut off literally in 2 weeks.
No, and I agree. But here's the part that I'm struggling with. There's part of me that goes, this is such a popular piece. And I was thinking about this today. Maybe, okay, fine, give Manchin his way. It's taken out. And then you bring that as a standalone bill and you make Republican voters are very happy with what they're getting. Make 10 Republicans come around, or 11 Republicans have to come along. Now, they won't, but there's got to be a way that you start moving some of this stuff and holding them accountable too, because in all of this, we're focused on Manchin and the Democrats, and nobody's talking about the unity of the Republican Party against any of this stuff.
Well, honestly, this is one of my frustrations with how this whole year has gone. If the strategy at the front of the entire year was getting to 60 on things, whatever things didn't come to pass, you could pin on Republicans for not playing ball on what is generally popular legislation. Once you say, you know what, the Republicans, they're worthless. They won't do anything right. They're bottom feeders, they're corporate hacks. Don't waste your time. Do it ourselves in reconciliation. Well, that works when you have the 50. When you don't have the 50, all of that blame,
right,
all of that failure is solely on your own shoulders. And look, the Democrats are quite one vote short here, but it's a close but no cigar situation. And now you're in a consummate classic circular firing squad because Democrats put all the burden on themselves. And look, Mitt Romney has said he's for some version of a child tax credit. I mean, there are Republicans who've made some inklings here. They didn't like the Democratic version of it. But you could have gone down that path with child tax credit in particular and raised the expectation that Republicans can and should be part of that. And if they fell down the job, you can go to the voters in 2022 and say, hey, you want this? Get rid of these guys.
Yeah. How mortal of a wound is this if they don't get it passed?
I mean, it's already, whatever happens at this point is going to be tough. I mean, you're not getting the whole thing. No matter what happens, you're not getting the whole thing. It's going to be cut down further if anything happens at all. And that's going to lead to frustration because expectations were really high. And if Democrats were going to avoid a midterm disaster, you need, full party unity and ability to appeal to the swing. And at this juncture, it's hard to see how you get that full party unity. Some sliver of the party is going to be mad, disappointed and frustrated and take it out and maybe not want to show up on election day in 2022. And if you're going to beat the odds, because most president's parties lose some seats in a midterm election, the margins are so narrow, even in a really good scenario where Democrats, a lot of things are going right and the pandemic's lifting and inflation's coming down and they pass Build Back Better. I mean, you could do that and lose only 6 House seats, which would be, historically speaking, fantastic, but you'd still lose the House as it stands today. So I really feel like Democrats got to pitch a no-hitter if you're going to avoid losing both houses of Congress. And it doesn't feel like a no-hitter today. Maybe things can turn around, because I do think the pandemic can lift. I do think inflation can come down. I do think it's possible to pass something still. But it does feel harder to feel optimistic when you have this level of dissension and frustration going on.
Yeah, it just feels like the dugout is, they're having a brawl in the dugout. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Bill Scheer. Bill's a contributing editor over at Politico Magazine. You can check out the work that he does there at Politico Magazine. We'll get links out on social media. Also check out his website, billscheer.com. Now, there are some people, Bill, who are saying, hey, Biden's not going to get this. He should start doing some things through executive order. And I've got one friend who says he should right now immediately cancel $50,000 in student loan debt. Do you see the president doing any of those kind of measures that maybe he can do on his own with this, through maybe with climate change, maybe with some other stuff?
I mean, I'm sure they'll do something because, quite honestly, even if they pass Build Back Better today, I didn't see what was on the legislative calendar for 2022. Nothing's really queued up, This is going to be the maximum they could get through reconciliation, and there's no low-hanging fruit on the 60-vote, track waiting to be picked. So if you're going to do something in 2022, it was probably going to be by executive order. But that's not such a simple path because you've seen the Supreme Court. This is not a Supreme Court that's going to bow down to whatever Biden decides to do unilaterally. A lot of this could get struck down, perhaps on expedited fashion. And even what does survive would not survive if there was a pendulum swing in 2024 and the Republicans became president. I mean, executive orders is just not a fantastic way to govern because it's a flimsier tool. If you could actually pass things in Congress that stick, that's the way to get sustainable policy. He may well do some of these things because what else? Because you got to do something.
You got to take something to the voters.
He has really been resistant on the student debt thing, so I'm not expecting that particular one. But I imagine he's got to do something or other so it doesn't feel like it's a totally stagnant presidency.
You don't think he has to do something on student loan debt? I think 50,000 is a pipe dream. I was thinking like 10, something, some kind of something. But don't you think he has to do something on that since that was, something that did come up during the campaign?
I mean, 10 is what he ran on. He didn't run on 50. He ran on 10. But he's been reluctant to suggest that he can do it by himself. I don't know what his lawyers are telling him. I'm not steeped in the law myself on this. He seems reluctant to do something that's just going to get smacked down by the courts. So I imagine it's whatever his lawyers are telling him. I imagine that's as far as he's going to be willing to go.
Yeah. Last question, and I didn't ask you at the beginning. Did you buy drugs with your money? Did you get the drugs? Did you get the right drugs?
If you call sugar a drug, I bought a lot of sugar for my children, but nothing for myself.
Nothing for yourself. All right. Well, I just want to make sure because that accusation is out there, and we tweeted it out earlier today, and I got a lot of interesting responses. There were people who did buy drugs. Some of them bought insulin for $450, which again the Build Back Better plan would have helped with. But I'm just curious where you are. As always, Bill, I appreciate the time. Really great talking with you, my friend.
You too. Take care.
Good stuff. Bill Scheer. Again, make sure you check out his work over at Politico Magazine. Also his website, billscheer.com. Seriously, I look at this and, the reality is there's so much that we could be fighting over that would be so much more beneficial than this. This whole pie fight should have never seen the light of day. And my problem is, and this is a leadership problem in my view. This is Schumer. This is the administration. This should have been hammered out behind closed doors. This should not have been the pie fight that it's turned into. And this could be harmful next year, because over the summer we should have been passing this stuff so that next year it's fully in people's minds. Come January 15th of next year, there's going to be no check for families to help put food on the table after Christmas. There's going to be nothing, and that is going to be a problem. Now there's talk, we'll put it in, you'll double it up the month. We don't know you're getting anything. And that is a problem. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did you buy drugs? If you did, what kind? Or did you do like most people did? It just absorbed into the budget, helped put food on the table, helped keep the lights on, helped keep the kids, with school supplies and all that. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. That's all.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, the first story that I saw on Joe Manchin and the child tax credit, and the fact that, I don't know that he absolutely said this. There was no one mentioned as a direct person who said, he told me, but you got to know that this kind of, if we give those people money, they'll just spend it on beer and booze and drugs and whatever. That really is the line that I get from most conservatives. They have this view that anyone who needs assistance, any poor person, is irresponsible. And I've been asking, what did you spend your $250 per child on? How did you use that? Were you irresponsible? And interestingly enough, the responses that we got from people were, hey, I paid childcare, I paid groceries, I paid, one guy paid the blank out of his electric bill. Another person got some dental work. Not irresponsible ways of using the income. And in fact, I would argue very productive ways. And it's in my view that if you help these families, they're going to do better. And here to share some thoughts on where we are. In fact, he's the guy who wrote the article on Joe Manchin. Evidently told privately some colleagues that they just use it on drugs. I've asked our good friend Art Delaney to come talk with us. Art is a political reporter over at Huffington Post. He also co-hosts the Huffington Post political podcast. Arthur, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So let's start with the anonymous. It's anonymous at this point. He just told colleagues. How do we know that's accurate?
Well, it's something that's actually been talked about a lot among people who are following this on Capitol Hill for the last several weeks. We have it in our story. I wrote the story with my colleague Tara Golshan. We have it from two sources, and after our story came, first of all, Manchin did not deny it. We let them know about the story on Friday, and they declined to comment. But they knew we were putting this out there. And then after our story came out, NBC News separately confirmed it with some sources of their own.
Right.
So we're totally confident that this is what he said. And like you said, this is actually a very common conservative talking point about any program that gives people money, especially if it's poor people and there are no conditions attached to the money, which is the case with these child tax credit payments that go to virtually all parents in the United States. And so he says, yeah, they're gonna waste it on drugs, and he said that the paid leave would, West Virginians would go hunting with their paid leave. They'd call in sick and go hunting when deer season opens up.
See, that's what he might do. I mean, and maybe that's why he's missed some votes as well. But what we know from studies that have been done on this is, anytime you do these kind of programs, people use it where they need it. And sadly, most families in this country need food on the table, a roof over their head, and medical care. That seems to be the three things overwhelmingly spent with these funds. And I don't know why that's so hard to understand, because we have systems that are broken in all of those areas.
It's not an argument that's really grounded in an empirical. It's not like a factual thing, really. I'm sure there are some people, some parents who would waste their child tax credit payment on drugs, but there's nothing to suggest it's like a lot of parents do that. I covered years of welfare drug testing bills during the Obama administration. There was just an explosion of interest in this. And it's, a few states did, more than a dozen states did enact a drug testing policy, and they turned up a vanishingly small number of positive drug tests as a result.
Yeah, if I remember right, Tennessee was was huge in this. They spent millions of dollars on testing and caught virtually nobody.
Right, and the whole concept actually went out of style after Barack Obama left office. I don't think that's necessarily a coincidence, but I do think state lawmakers were like, well, people keep pointing out that this costs more money than it saves, when it is ostensibly a fiscally responsible policy. It's something that is supposed to save the government money that would be wasted on drugs. But the testing is expensive and doesn't catch anybody. Now, Manchin's not talking about adding a drug test to the child tax credit. He's just saying,
no, because we already know that doesn't work.
Yeah, right. He's just saying, I don't want to give people money; they'll waste it. And you can't argue with it. It's just a way of looking at the government that has prevailed among both Republicans and Democrats for decades in this country. It is a very deeply ingrained way of thinking about government spending that actually seems to go out of style. First, there was these drug testing schemes that didn't yield great results for the policymakers behind them. And then there was the coronavirus pandemic, and even Republicans had embraced unconditional cash assistance. They sent checks to everybody.
Yep.
Twice.
Yep.
So there was this breakthrough moment, and that's what Democrats seized on to finally enact this monthly child allowance that is a standard family policy in every country in the world that we don't have, resulting in high child poverty. Democrats are like, look, the cat's out of the bag. Unconditional cash assistance is popular and it works. And so we've had it for 6 months, and now we're not going to have it anymore, it seems, because Joe Manchin just doesn't like it for these views he articulated in private, but not in public.
Right. And the weird thing to me, Art, the really weird thing is, you said, things come and go out of style, and I'm looking at this tax credit money, and I can't help but think back to Milton Friedman. You know who Uncle Milty was, right? The Chicago school economist that the right just loves because he's the free market guy. He had an idea of a negative tax of giving each person in the country $6,000 so that they could participate in the economy. And it's what eventually morphed into the earned income tax credit that Reagan put into office, so into place. And you go, how is it that like you said, things come into vogue, they come out of vogue, and we never talk about the past and how things have either worked or not worked, this was a very conservative idea.
Well, every country in Europe started doing this after World War II, and Richard Nixon embraced it. He called it the Family Assistance Plan. Just giving parents money makes sense when you consider that children are expensive, and they make it more difficult for a parent to obtain labor income because someone's got to take care of the kid. How are we going to propagate the human race by immiserating parents and letting the labor market punish them? People have known this is wrong for a long time, and it's a complicated story, but it has a lot to do with race, the way programs that gave people money at the state level and the federal level were used by poor people to do bad things. Supposedly, there were sensational stories. It was like a genre of newspaper story in the 20th century.
Welfare queen.
Right, of the welfare queen. And this is just a reflex, a muscle memory in American politics that it seemed we were growing out of, thanks to Donald Trump and the coronavirus pandemic, and Democrats building a coalition around the exact policy that they wound up enacting. They had planned to do this.
No, what's weird is, West Virginia is one of the poorest states in the country, one of the whitest states in the country, and I'm assuming this plan and some of the polling that I've seen overwhelmingly popular in that state. In fact, the newspaper there in Charleston, the Gazette Mail, they said we need this so bad. Build Back Better backers say the bill would protect West Virginia's most vulnerable as Manchin resists. They've endorsed it. Virtually all of the politicians there are saying, no, Democratic politicians, we need this. And yet here they're not going to get it. So, I think about next month, on January 15th, when a check doesn't come, how many kids then go hungry by the end of the month?
Certainly more kids will go hungry by the end of the month, starting in January, than they did when their parents were receiving this monthly benefit. What a wrinkle here is that there is actually forthcoming a lump sum amounting to half of what they would have received in this year, because the credit started in July. When you file your taxes, you can get a lump sum for the first half of this year, so that will be helpful. But that you won't be able to get that till February. So we know from monthly surveys of households and other data that the poverty went down among children like 30%, nearly 30% each month, thanks to this cash. It will go right back up.
That's staggering.
It's just arithmetic. Arithmetic.
That is a staggering number when you're talking about, if you're pro-birth, if you're pro-child, you're pro-life, this is something you should be celebrating. This is the way that we encourage people. If you're against abortion, this is the way you encourage people to bring children into the world because, hey, we're going to help you feed them. You're not going to live in a destitute situation. It just seems like this is just insane that we can't get 51 people, one Republican, to go, hey, I'm going to take Joe Manchin's spot.
Well, it's funny you should mention it because today there is a Republican in the Senate who does love the concept. His name is Mitt Romney. He had his own version of this that actually would give parents more money than Democrats went with, but he doesn't. They disagree over how to pay for it. He would consolidate and eliminate some existing programs. But there are people who recognize that giving parents money is beneficial for creating families, and Mitt Romney's not alone, but he's the only one who's really embraced the idea of monthly cash, unconditional. And he put out a statement today like, all right, let's get to work on something like my idea. But I have talked to him, and I've talked to several other Republican senators who you might think would be into this. They're not. They want a work requirement. Getting rid of the work requirement is the whole point of this policy for Democrats. A work requirement is just sort of a propaganda way of saying we will exclude unemployed people from the policy. If you were to do that, you would not reduce poverty. It would just go out the window.
Right.
So it's a non-starter. It's hard to imagine a compromise on that. But I guess that's what we'll have to look at if Manchin can't be moved. And things are testy. It does not seem like they're gonna get a deal with him.
And that's a scary thing. But, I'm not entirely against the idea of a work mandate as long as there is something in there that says that government will be the employer of last resort. I know that the private sector can't, or more likely won't, create enough quality jobs for everyone. So there has to be the public sector that's going to step in and say, look, everybody should have some type of employment to be able to support their families. I believe in the therapeutic qualities of work. I believe in the idea that that through your labor, you're supporting yourself, does give you some bit of self-esteem, and there are good things with that. But to say, hey, go find a job and magically expect people who don't live on a bus line or near any jobs to go magically find one is idiotic, and I would argue just plain mean.
Well, yeah, and if they've got kids, they can't, or the kid will die, right? Like, someone's got to take care of the kid. You can't have a job and parent simultaneously. You can't get a job that supports your whole family if the other parent isn't also working. It's just the way it is. The labor market does not value families at all, and so the public sector has to figure it out. Unless we're good with just immiserating parents and putting children in child poverty, even though it makes their lives worse and results in higher costs on society through their various problems they'll wind up having when they're adults. So it seems like there is we had a breakthrough moment. Maybe there could be another one where there's a big debate about this, but it seems clear at this point that there will be an interruption in the monthly payments, and that child poverty will go back up in the month of January.
And the thing is, and this is the thing that gets me, Art, and maybe you'll disagree with me, but I guess maybe it's just I'm fortunate that I've always had a good paying union job, that I've made good financial decisions and been very lucky in my working years. But like $250 a month to me is not a lot of money. It's helpful. It's not life changing, but I look at the number of people that it is life changing to, and I go, how in your right mind do you go, you know what, we're just going to rip that out from under them? That makes no sense to me.
Well, and Democrats imagined that the idea of like increasing child poverty by 30% or doubling it, they envisioned it, being even more dramatic, would be simply terrifying to any politician, and that they could do the child tax credit with monthly advance payments for just the second half of this year, and then nobody would dare let it die. And they were wrong. People are happy to let it die. And their whole scheme was to do it for one more year after this year, and then it would be a breeze to reauthorize it at the end of 2022. And I did some stories like, well, are you sure about that? Seems kind of sketchy. And look what's happening now.
Yeah.
So there was a huge miscalculation. In the past, a temporary tax policy was a safe bet. You could keep it alive forever because no one wanted to hike taxes. And it just isn't working with this because people are doing old school welfare politics after Democrats had presumed we were past that. This is welfare to Republicans. It's welfare to Joe Manchin. And that doesn't work in the year 2021, surprisingly.
It's crazy. And I've got friends who are going, no, we need universal basic income. We need, Milton Friedman's negative tax. And I'm going, we are so far from that. I don't even think you can begin talking about it because we can't take care of the most vulnerable. And for me, this discussion is, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. I was a poor kid. I can't imagine what that little bit of money would have done for my mother and I living in the conditions that we lived in. I know our neighborhood, there'd have been food at the end of the month. I know that for sure because it wasn't always assured. I know that people may have gotten, secondhand cars and gotten better opportunities at jobs. There were, who knows what the possibilities could have been. And we didn't get that. And I don't want that to happen to another generation of kids growing up the way that I did.
Yeah, well, your parents would have been a little happier, right? Like that. I've been interviewing parents for the past week, and that's what they say. Like, I was getting by without this money, but having it made my life a lot easier. I had less stress. We knew we could meet expenses and even get ahead a little bit without having to use credit cards. So when the money goes away, people's lives will just be a little bit worse. It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's not there isn't this magic like soul destroying power of receiving money. That's the argument. Like, people won't be as happy if they're not earning all the money themselves. If you're just giving it to them, it will impoverish their well-being, and it's just not true. If you give people money, especially when they don't have much, their lives will just be a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that $250 can be life-changing, resources for people, and we've got folks who are saying, "Nope, sorry, you're on your own." That's angering and frustrating to me. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Arthur Delaney. Arthur's a political reporter over at Huffington Post. He's also the co-host of the Huffington Post Politics Podcast. You can check out their website, Huffington Post, huffpost.com, where you can find his article on Joe Manchin privately telling colleagues the parents are going to use the tax credit money on drugs. And I did find one parent who did use it on drugs, Art. I bought the kids insulin because they're type 1 diabetics. $450 they spent on the insulin drugs, where if the Build Back Better plan had passed, it would have only been $70. So it's just one of those things. But Art, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Quick break, right back. Stick around.